and a code was injected in their development pipeline, and that was distributed to their customers, and their customers' data is also compromised due to this. So we are going to discuss this code injection in future, but we are going to see a lab for SQL injection. So for example, if your developer has created an application, and we are going to see that how SQL injection work in a real world. So there are quite a few sites available, and whenever you go into the sites, so there are different functionality in the site are available. So you can see these are all the products which are displayed over here. If I click on lifestyle, you can see that it is showing us category equals to lifestyle. If I click on corporate gifts, it is showing us that it on the items within the category of corporate gifts. So if I wanted to see that whether this specific website allows us to inject code like SQL injection, I just put an apostrophe over here. And as soon as I put an apostrophe, I can see internal server error that says that this specific website allows injection. Why it is allowing injection? Because it is providing an error instead of providing something else. So for example, if I go to the ras.pk, I think, and if I search something in the RAS, for example, lifestyle or whatever, so you can see that there is a URL which formed at the top in lighting and light bulbs. And if I put apostrophe over here, it will not give me. You see that it is not giving me an error, so it is not exploitable through SQL injection. But in this specific website, when we put apostrophe, it provided us an error. That means that it is exploitable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an apostrophe, then plus or plus 1 equals to 1. So what I did is I have closed the apostrophe sign of this specific text over here. Then I have put an or as a SQL statement, and then I have provided a statement which is always true. 1 equals to 1 is always true, right? So I just press plus and then do 2 dash signs. So why I put 2 dash signs, it will ignore everything written after this specific statement. So as soon as I click on this specific statement, you can see that it has provided me all the items which are available. So there are items, if I normally click on all, you can see there are only handful of items, like 12 items available over here. But if when I did the SQL injection, I'm able to see all the items which was even not approved. So this is what.
Welcome to Global Information Security Society for Professionals of Pakistan.
Hello, thank you so much for joining in. And as Subhani Saab mentioned, that this is the first session of our probably 3-part session, and this is related to web application security. And we are going to discuss about OWASP top 10, and in the second session and third session, we are going to go with the practical ethical hacking for the OWASP things. So first of all, my name is Nuruddin Surani, and I'm in the software development industry since 1994. I've been training and working with different organizations since then. So my primary firm is in Dallas, Texas, and we have served around 220 banks over there. And we are also working with quite a few local banks over here too. So how we have laid out this session is we're going to start with the brief introduction, which we already did. Then we're going to discuss about the web app security and how ethical hacking can help us on that side. At the same time, then we are going to go with OWASP top 10 list. And in this list, what we are going to do is we are going to discuss the items first, then what kind of breaches happened in the past with large organizations. We are going to discuss a couple of exploits during this discussion, but the next session is totally a practical based approach on which we might ask you to have your computers with you. So those are two sessions in which we are going to use the ethical hacking techniques and tools to exploit those things. And in this session, we are also going to discuss about how to avoid. So OWASP Web Top 10 is a pretty popular list, and they have released their first list in 2017. And in 2021, they have changed order of this list based off of the breaches or incidents happened during that time. And so the order is based off of the priority. So the number one is broken access control, then cryptographic failures, injection, and secure design. And we are going to take every point one at a time. We are going to understand that for a few of them, we are going to see that what is the practical implementation of those guys. And for the 100% of these guys, as we've discussed in the next session, we are going to use the tools to exploit all of those guys based off of your interest. And then we are going to see that how we can avoid these vulnerabilities in our system. So as I've told you that Mike MD and myself is primarily belong to the development side. So we are definitely going to talk about more about the development, how to on the web application side and not the network and all, security side. So number one thing is broken access control. So this is the top of the list of OWASP top 10. And this specific item basically relates to the vulnerability in the applications. So for example, if you are logged in into some application, and based off of that, you can change your privileges, like either you do horizontal escalation or vertical escalation. Based off of that, you can access the items which you should not access. At the same time, there are endpoints or there are pages which should not be displayed to you, and you will be able to display those pages. That is primarily broken access control. So I repeat, so for example, as a user, I should not have access to the admin panel, but for any reason I can access that. That is a broken access control. If there is a page or a web API for which I have to have administrative control and I access that, that is a broken access control. If there is a page or a web API for which I have administrative control and I access that, that is a broken access control. So
Guy,
sorry guys, there is some power outage at my end and I'm reconnecting to the Zoom. Sorry about that.
I think you're connected now.
So we were actually discussing that first vulnerability that is related to broken access control, and in a couple of minutes we are going to share our screen and start from where we have left. For the mishap, guys. So basically, the I can
स्लाइड्स को
access
प्ले मोड
those.
में ले आए स्लाइड्स को
Sure,
प्ले मोड में
बिल्कुल,
ले आए
sure. So I can access those items which are not like allowed me to access. So that is broken access control. So I'm going to discuss two specific incidents which happened due to broken access control. So Facebook, you all know that's a big company, and they had an exploit in 2018. They have a feature with the name of View as feature, and through View as feature, what you can do is you can access their Facebook access token, and through that access token, you can get access to other users' data. So that is a broken access control vulnerability which Facebook has faced. Similarly, LinkedIn has faced similar kind of vulnerability in one of their API, where their API is authentication free. So historically, when we were developing, we used to develop web applications. So one of our developers, what he did is he actually created a page where you can write SQL queries. So it is for his ease that he don't have to log into the databases and write the select queries if you have to enter new columns or update any columns. So he can do it through that interface, and that interface is passwordless interface. So there are quite a few developers out there who actually develop an endpoint in the APIs or web pages, which is not actually secured like that. So we're going to see one of the examples related to this. So I'm going to go to the labs. So this is a ports figure, and you can go to this specific website. There are labs available. These labs you can use. All of these labs are related to web application security. So we are going to do one of the labs related to unprotected admin functionality. So normally whenever anyone come to your any hacker come to the website, they normally wanted to access different areas which are not actually protected like that. So for that, you can use this specific website. It will help you to understand that how hackers are going to uh, access the places where they don't have access. So for that, we are going to do a small lab that is related to broken access control. Uh, Logging into this specific website, you can access this website. Just you can sign up a free account with this website and access all the labs for this website. And I'm going to go with the first lab, which is related to broken access control. So it's logging in. I went to access control labs. So I'll access the lab, just click over here and starting a lab. So for example, this is one of the website which is built by one of our developers, and I wanted to access the admin functionality. What I can do is I can just try different kind of options which are available over here, admin panel, and it is not allowing me to access. But there is, for example, so as soon as I typed one of the words, which is administrative panel, so there are quite a few developers out there who actually code, and they think that if they have created a page which is not available in the menu and has a different kind of name, no one can access that page. But primarily hackers try to access these kind of pages, and they can access to that specific. So for example, if I access to this page and I can delete users and stuff like that. So broken access control is primarily, as discussed, you can access those pages or access those endpoints which is not primarily available by default to you. So to avoid this thing, what you can do is there are a couple of things which you can do to avoid this kind of thing. Number one is follow the principle of least privileges, where you allow the least privileges to the users. At the same time, you can use the role-based access control. So there are applications which is built on top of role-based access control. So you can create administrator role, you can create super admin role, and allow those roles to the user instead of allowing the user level privileges. Then you enforce access control consistency. When we talk about access control consistency, there are applications which are built out there in the commercial area also, where they just apply security to the front end. So there are different areas. So there is a front end, there is APIs, and there is a database. So basically, you have to enforce the access control on all the three levels where are possible. And then you implement strong session management. So there are applications out there which don't have proper session management implemented, and users can exploit the sessions. So these are the things which you can do to avoid broken access control. Number two vulnerability is cryptographic failures. Cryptographic failures, cryptography is like in the world since 1900 BC, and there are different cryptographic algorithms out there which are in use, and hackers basically exploit these guys for their own purposes. So one of the models which is introduced in 1790 is with the name of wheel cipher. Wheel ciphers look something like this. So if I type science and there is an inner circle, I can select based off of science I and C Y. So you can see that I have encrypted this specific word based off of this wheel cipher. So this is a simple cryptographic example, but there are in real world commercial applications which was exploited due to their cryptographic failures. One of those companies are Ledger. Ledger is basically a cryptocurrency wallet, and their data related to their user was compromised, and they are not properly encrypted, and that has email addresses, names, and other personal information. Similarly, Adobe had a massive data breach, and where hacker actually uh, breached the data of over 150 million users, and those specific records are not properly encrypted. That's why they can access that data. So to avoid these kind of failures, what we can do is we should not transfer data in plain text. So even to this day, there are developers who actually transfer data in plain text. That is a problem. Similarly, if you use a older cryptographic method, that's a problem. There are people out there who actually store passwords in config files. So administrative passwords are even if they are hashed or encrypted, but if they are stored in config files, that's a problem, and hackers can actually exploit that thing. Similarly, cryptographic key management, if your keys are not properly managed, or your keys are not enough randomness in the keys. So if you are using a same key for encrypting all the username but all the password, that's a problem. If you have saved your data without encryption, that's a problem. So all of these points you can use to avoid cryptographic failure. That is number 2 in OWASP top 10 list. As we have discussed that in this session, we are going to discuss that what OWASP top 10 list is. And in the next session, we are going to have a practical session for all of these guys. So you can practically explore all of these vulnerabilities and how we can do this. So third vulnerability is important one, that is injection. And there is two kinds of injection. One is code injection. Number 2 is SQL injection. At this point, we are going to discuss about SQL injection, and there is another point which we will discuss in the future slides, which is related to code injection. So SQL injection is where the coding is done in a way where you can exploit through SQL statements, and like you can terminate the SQL statement over there and exploit that thing. And we are going to see a practical example of this in a minute. So there are two incidents which was happened in past. One is Heartland payment system, where the attacker attacked through SQL injection, and they have actually exposed 134 billion credit cards was exposed. Similarly, SolarWind was a code injection thing where one of their product, Orion, was compromised and a code was injected in their development pipeline, and that was distributed to their customers, and their customers' data is also compromised due to this. So we are going to discuss this code injection in future, but we are going to see a lab for SQL injection. So for example, if your developer has created an application, and we are going to see that how SQL injection work in a real world. So there are quite a few sites available, and whenever you go into the sites, so there are different functionality in the site are available. So you can see these are all the products which are displayed over here. If I click on lifestyle, you can see that it is showing us category equals to lifestyle. If I click on corporate gifts, it is showing us that on the items within the category of corporate gifts. So if I wanted to see that whether this specific website allows us to inject code like SQL injection, I just put an apostrophe over here. And as soon as I put an apostrophe, I can see internal server error that says that this specific website allows injection. Why it is allowing injection? Because it is providing an error instead of providing something else. So for example, if I go to the ras.pk, I think, and if I search something in the RAS, for example, lifestyle or whatever, so you can see that there is a URL which formed at the top in lighting and light bulbs. And if I put apostrophe over here, it will not give me. You see that it is not giving me an error, so it is not exploitable through SQL injection. But in this specific website, when we put apostrophe, it provided us an error. That means that it is exploitable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an apostrophe, then plus or plus 1 equals to 1. So what I did is I have closed the apostrophe sign of this specific text over here. Then I have put an or as a SQL statement, and then I have provided a statement which is always true. 1 equals to 1 is always true, right? So I just press plus and then do 2 dash signs. So why I put 2 dash signs, it will ignore everything written after this specific statement. So as soon as I click on this specific statement, you can see that it has provided me all the items which are available. So there are items, if I normally click on all, you can see there are only handful of items, like 12 items available over here. But when I did the SQL injection, I'm able to see all the items which was even not approved. So this is what exactly SQL injection is. So in this vulnerability, we have seen that the website can be coded in a way that it can be exploited through SQL injection, and you can inject SQL code to access that website. So to avoid this, what you can do is you can use stored procedure. If you have used a SQL stored procedure, that cannot be SQL injectable. If you have used prepared as a statement, you cannot concatenate query. Input validation is another thing which you can do to avoid this SQL injection. Then you have ORM tools available, like in .NET, you have entity frameworks, you can use all of those guys. Then you have escape user input. So whatever input I'm giving, it should not consider that thing part of the code as it did in the last example. And we should use least privilege principle. So that way, even if they can view the data, they cannot delete or update any data. So this is the injection vulnerability, which is in OWASP A03. So OWASP A04 is a very interesting one, and this says insecure design. So I'm going to show you a couple of real life examples too, but first I'm going to define that what exactly it is. So for example, back in 2006, 2007, I was working with a grocery store. So what happened is we thought that what we should do is, if we can give huge discounts on like sugar and rice and those kind of things, where our sales should actually increase. So what we did is we provided huge discounts on those items. But what happened is there are quite a few intelligent people out there, and they just came to our grocery stores and they just bought sugar and rice. They didn't bought anything else. So that is a design flaw, right? Then when we have learned this thing, it was mandatory that you have to buy other things also with rice and sugar. So that is a design flaw. So in real world, you can see that there was earlier when eBay uh, is in his like starting phase, they have a vulnerability in design. What happened is like the highest bidder user ID will display it in their bidding interface. So any hacker can go and they can like provide user ID and wrong password a couple of times, and that will lock out the highest bidder's account. So you can see that if I uh, provide wrong password 3 or 4 times, it will lock out the actual user. That way, what hacker can do is they can actually win the auction providing a similar kind of a bid. So that was a design flaw. That is not a coding flaw, or that is not an implementation flaw. Similarly, when Zoom got popular, you know that in COVID timeframe, it was quite popular. Earlier, they were not providing security password and room thing. So there was a thing called Zoom bombing. So any person can come into a room. They just have to randomly go into a room by providing a guide, and they can just do anything. So, for example, if we are conducting a session over here and someone comes in and like highlight a few things and do some erroneous things, so that's called Zoom bombing. So that is a design thing. So for for avoiding design insecure design thing, you have to provide secure system development lifecycle. SSDLC is the thing which you should follow, and again you also have to embed security by design. So in the development, you have to implement the security from the beginning. You also have to implement modeling, and principle of least privileges is the primary thing. You can see that in quite a few OS thing we have discussed that thing, and you can follow the secure defaults to like avoid insecure design. Then fifth vulnerability is security misconfiguration. So there are quite a few things which are kind of available. For example, if you install SQL Server for the first time, there is a default user with the name of SA, that is system administrator. So if immediately what you should do is you like this is one of the security misconfiguration thing. Another security misconfiguration thing is like your website actually provide an error which is in verbose mode. So they hacker are in like search of these kind of thing, that if website provide any kind of data related to their platforms, their database, so that will help them exploit those things. Similarly, unnecessary services are enabled, then that's also a security misconfiguration thing. Then if your folder permissions are not proper, that is also security misconfiguration thing. And there are things like in there is a thing called phpMyAdmin. If you wanted to access the MySQL database, there is an administrative interface which is like open and exposed to a public, then that's also a problem. So the all of these guys relates to security misconfiguration. So there was a breach happened in 2019 with Capital One, where their web application firewall was misconfigured. That was a security misconfiguration, and based off of that, there 106 million customer records were breached. So that's a security misconfiguration thing. So for to avoiding that, what you should do is remove all the default credentials. So for example, as we have discussed that when SQL Server there is a SA account. Similarly, the default accounts you should and say similarly you have to minimize the attack surface by disabling unnecessary features, services, etc. Implement proper access control, patch and update. We are going to discuss about patch and update in a minute in the next slide. And then environment specific configuration needs to be done properly. and error handling should be done properly. This is the fifth vulnerability of OWASP top 10. And we are just, as we have discussed, that we are discussing the what breaches happen and how you can avoid. And in the next session, what we are going to do is we are going to practically implement, as we have done a couple of practical in this session, but those are a very high level because the time only allowed to do that. But in the next session, we are going to use like OWASP, ZAP, or Kali Linux, and going to exploit all of these vulnerabilities. So the sixth number in OS top 10 is vulnerable or outdated components, and this is a very interesting one. So definitely every one of you will tell that who's going to use outdated components or vulnerable components, but practically this is being happened quite a few times. So I'm going to show you a sheet. So this study I did a few years back. So these are all the top banks of Pakistan. And you can see there are quite a few banks who are still using WordPress. So WordPress has plugin outdate and vulnerable plugins. There are quite a few. If you don't update your plugins in a timely manner, so there is a very possibility that your site can be hacked. So you can see out of 12 banks, 10 of them are using WordPress. So this specific vulnerability is definitely there, and there are companies who are actually having problem with this vulnerability also. So we are going to see that what attacks was happened due to this vulnerability. So Equifax, it's a big company, and they had a massive breach. They are using Apache struts, and that's a web application framework for Java. And those guys, Apache Struts already released a new version, but Equifax haven't updated that version. They are using the older version, which has security vulnerabilities, and that was exploited, and around 147 million people affected due to that. Similarly, there was a recent thing happened. There is a plugin called Eval PHP. The Eval PHP was not updated since last 11 years, and it was like that kind of a thing. But what it Eval do is you can put PHP core code inside your blogs or pages. So someone actually in the hacking industry identified that this can be exploited pretty well. And since September 2022, it was like downloaded quite rapidly. And this is specific, whoever has this plugin installed in their website, their site can be breached and malware can attack can be done. So there are quite a few things which needs to be done. So important thing is all the components which are vulnerable and outdated, you should look at that. So important thing is like quite a few of us like are using jQuery and common functionality, and I wanted to show you another thing. So whenever you're using this kind of uh, third-party libraries, those libraries are not staying there. Those libraries have further libraries in it. So for example, this is one of our website. I have a company in Canada, and this is our website, which is built on WordPress. And you can see that this specific website is using components, and those components are using another component. So this is uh, a simple example that when you use components, and it is very important to know that what kind of components your website is using, and those components are not outdated. At the same time, if those components are using other components, you should also take measures to check those guys also. So for actually avoiding this specific vulnerability, we are at the 6 and we only have 4 left. So you have to have inventory of components, you have to update components regularly. Again, we have discussed about the dependency. You have to check dependency on a regular basis. And wherever possible, you can uh, uh, minimize the use of the components. At the same time, outdated components, as we have seen, eval PHP, the components which are not like in service or not maintained, regularly, you should avoid using those components. If you have to use those components, what you can do is you can isolate those guys, like iframe them, or somehow don't make it part of your specific system, and like how make them isolated. So these are all the things which we can do for vulnerable and outdated component. OWASP 07 is identification and authentication failure. So primarily, this specific thing relates to password, and like all of the things related to password, how you store password, how you transfer password, how you save, like remember me kind of a thing, sessions and all of those guys. So all of those things related to identification and authentication failures. The two major breaches happened, one related to Twitter. So primarily this is related to social engineering, but what happened is the attacker social engineered one of the employee of Twitter, and they get access to their system. But what happened is, like, they can access very high profile accounts, which includes Barack Obama, Elon Musk, and they are able to disable the MFA. So they've changed password of these accounts and access those accounts and like publicize cryptocurrency related something. So this is like, this is a hybrid kind of attack. So they in start they did social engineering to get the username password, but afterwards they will be able to remove the MFA out of the picture. So MFA is a very mandatory thing. Similarly, a Marriott incident happened where around 500 million customers' data was breached due to identification or authentication failures. So how you can avoid is like implementing password policies, implementing MFA. You have to have a secure password storage and whatever password recovery mechanism. So I've seen sites which ask you where you wanted to email your password. You should not do that. Similarly, you should not provide the old password. You also have to reset the password. All of those guys come into identification and authentication failure category. Then insecure session management is one of the reasons why this thing happens. So there are things when you do remember me, that thing stores in your cookies, and if your cookies is not properly protected, hackers can actually exploit those things. And similarly, you can, if you are using outdated authentication protocol, or if you're transferring data without encryption, so that is another thing which create this problem. Then software data integrity failures is another one, as we have discussed in the injection. So you have seen that there is a SQL injection for which we did a practical, and there is a code injection. So this is related to, somehow related to code injection. So whenever you release your software, so what is the guarantee that the software which you have built is reaching to the customer and there is no breaches in between your pipeline. So this is one of the things which was in OWASP 08, and this actually relates to the entire development pipeline. So one of the couple of breaches which happened, one is related to SolarWinds, where one of their software Orion, there was a malicious code injected in the software, and they didn't know that, and they have supplied this software to quite a few of their customers, and all of those customers' computers are also breached due to this code injection. Similar thing happened with CCleaner software, which was later acquired by, which was actually acquired by Avast. Avast, you know, that is an antivirus or endpoint security company. So there was a malicious version of CCleaners available, and that has a backdoor through which hackers can access the computer, whoever has this CCleaner version. But they have actually somehow mitigated this thing. And then, so to avoid data integrity, software data integrity failures, what you can do is your development environment should be safe. So security should be part of your development. Similarly, code signing is very important. Code signing is like what is your binary when it is built and when it is distributed. So when user download, it should check that the hash of the client code is okay or not. And then least privileges is one of the things. So your software should only have the privileges which it requires for performing the action. And then a strong authentication to privileged accounts. So in your development environment, the entire development pipeline, whoever is your DevOps, whoever is your building responsible for building your solution should have only the privileges which is required to them. So this is the 08 of OWASP top 10. The ninth item in OWASP top 10 is security logging and monitoring. And primarily security logging and monitoring is pretty important. And there are quite a few cases which we are going to discuss in a couple of minutes. So whenever any exploit happens, so there are two kinds of things. Either you don't log anything related to security incidents, or you log too much. So both of those guys are dangerous. So you have to log moderately, and the important events should be triggers either through emails or through your dashboards. It should all of the security incidents should appear over there. So there are 2 or 3 breaches which are very popular. One is Capital One, which we have already discussed a couple of slides back, that there are 100 million accounts were compromised, and Capital One didn't know this thing in a timely manner. Otherwise, they are going to stop this specific breach. Similarly, Marriott incident, they didn't know for 4 years that their account information is being breached, and the information is like shared with the hackers. Similarly, Google Plus, before Google Plus shut down, they identified that 500,000 users' data was exposed from 2015 to 2018. So the company like Google don't have reasonable logging and monitoring security available like that. So whenever your team build anything, so you should implement proper security logging, and those logs should be reviewed in a timely manner. At the same time, the alerts for the high value items should be done in a timely manner. Similarly, logs should be stored in a proper places where no one can tamper those logs. At the same time, you should not store any PII or sensitive information in your logs. And incident response process should be there. So whenever any incident happens in the security log, you know that what you need to do for these things. And finally, if you use automated tools, that is the best. So these are a few things which you can do to avoid this specific thing. Then server-side requests forgery is another thing. So in this specific thing, whenever your site is primarily calling something from another site, so what hacker can do is hacker can change that URL and use it for their own benefit. So there is a very popular incident which happened with Capital One, where this server-side forgery attack happened, and due to that, they are using AWS environment, and that actually led to the expose of the sensitive data. So there is a very good site available out there, which I'm going to share with you, with the name of Contra, and you can use this specific site. So what this specific site does is all the popular breaches which happened in the industry. So all of those guys on TikTok, on Facebook, on Capital One, so they did all simulation of all of those attacks. So let me show you one of the attacks. This is related to Capital One. So when I go to this site, it has showed me the URL. I have just pasted URL over here. You can see that it has created a Capital 10 copy of Capital One thing. So I just copied username over here. I just copied password over here. I click on sign in, and I click on more account services. In more account services, I have change card image option available. So this is what actually happening to Capital One. That's what they are showing. So when I drag and drop my image over here and I upload this specific thing and preview it, so you can see that it is showing us a URL at the top. So this is a server-side forgery vulnerability. So they are actually showing us URL over here, which is Amazon AWS S3 bucket, in which they are actually saving the thing. So what I can do is I can change that URL with some other URL. For checking that, I just copied a image URL over here and I replaced that URL with this specific new URL. So you can see that cat image is appearing over here. So that says that I can change this URL and the server is not checking the URL. So that's I know that that vulnerability is existing. And what I can do is I can just go review the code, and based off of that, I'll show you. I can change the image. Instead of image, what I can do is I can put some executable code over there, and that will actually help me show other things. So you can see that I am just copying metadata related thing, and I just control A, paste it over here. And you can see instead of showing us the image, it's showing me the metadata, and I can manipulate all of these guys. So as discussed, that server-side forgery is also available, and it's a very valid kind of attack where you can use the a different server name or URL instead of the actual one, and then you can attack the thing. So to avoid this specific vulnerability, what you can do is you can simply implement input validation, whitelisting. You can use URL parsing libraries which are available out there. You can restrict that you can only access this specific network, or like AWS or whatever. You cannot go beyond this network. So all of these things you can do to avoid the SSRF. So apart from all of the things which we have discussed, there are two things which is very important whenever you're coding. Your team should know that they start coding with the secure coding practices, and the developer should be provided awareness and training related to security. So my session actually ends here. That is today's session. This is all this is all about the OWASP top 10, and we actually did a couple of examples over here. And if you people are interested, what we are gonna do is we are going to have another session on the same topic, in which we are not going to do the theory part because we already did that. And we are going to see using Kali Linux and OWASP Zap. We're going to use these two tools to actually implement every vulnerability which we have discussed over here. So Shiraz sir, I'm done with my session. If you guys have any questions, so I am
जी
happy
सर
to
अस्सलाम
answer.
वालेकुम सोनी साहब स्लाइड ना वापस ले पेज 1 पे ले स्लाइड अपनी
Sure.
या किस कोई भी एक स्लाइड खोल के रख ले उसमें और हम
Sure,
लोगों से सवाल पूछते हैं
let me do that. Sure.
असल जुबैर साहब है मैं उनको मैं अनम्यूट करता हूँ
Sure. जी जी सर.
Assalamu alaikum.
Myself.
Thank you for this session, and
Thank you, sir.
it was an amazing learning experience. And I
Thank
have
you,
a
sir.
few questions about that.
Sure.
So about the AO2, you said that that vulnerability was caused by where we were sending insecure data right into the front end. Let's use layman terms over here. From the
Sure.
back end in the APIs, the data was sent as arrays and objects, and it's in an insecure format, right,
Sure.
as words.
Sure.
So what I did in an application was I implemented JWT tokens for this
Perfect.
encryption. However, the problem I faced was my data, the size of my API response became so large. I mean, it was the size was very large of the response.
Sure.
So how do we deal with that? So that
So like
might have a problem with the network. It might cause network issues also, right?
I agree. So if the size of the data, I think you have to go for like if you are facing the cryptographic failure, because this is a very AO2 is a very huge thing. How you're saving your data, like the data needs to be secured, how you're saving those data, how you're transferring those data, and everything around those lines are covering AO2. So if you're only asking about the authentication, so authentication, you can go with another thing and you can introduce MFA or something else to actually protect that thing if the size is the problem for you guys. Otherwise, JWT is working with very well with quite a few organizations.
All right.
So
So
yeah,
basically
yeah.
what you're saying is that if I have a secure web page and let's say I have a dashboard and that dashboard has a lot of data, it shouldn't matter if the string value is too, so string length is too large because of the JWT token. That's what you're saying, that I should
It should
just
not.
send
It
it
should
through.
not. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so next question I have is regarding AO7.
Sure.
As a digital product developer, what flow would you recommend? Obviously, it is a mix of design and development. What flow would you recommend for the forget password flow for mobile apps as well as web apps? In web apps, I'm guessing that whenever a user clicks on a forget password URL, that user gets an email, and in that email, he gets a one-time access website where he can add the new password and confirm password. Is that the right flow? And the further question is, what is the right flow for mobile applications?
So there are two things what you can do is like normally these days, you know that there is an MFA available with your mobile phone, most of the applications. So normally there are what people are doing, they are sending you an OTP, and through that OTP you can do the password change for that specific thing. That is one thing you can do. Number two thing is you will provide a URL with a GUID or something where user can click and that will allow them, and that is only a one-time use kind of a thing, and for a specific time you can use that. Number three approach, which is being used, is you provide a temporary password. So these three things are actually in place for AO7. For mobile app, similarly, if you for mobile app, what you can do is you can provide a temporary password, and in mobile flow, whenever someone logs in through your temporary password, it will ask them to change their password immediately.
Got it.
That is
And
normally,
last, I
yeah.
will not take more time.
No, sure.
What would we have to do to gain access of the recording of this, and how will we get the slides which you?
I will
That's
forward the slides to Shehzad Saab and he will forward it to you. And recording, Shehzad Saab, can you please?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel called Gispp Academy, so it will be there, inshallah. Not immediately,
what's
but
the name of the YouTube?
by tomorrow.
What's the name of the YouTube channel?
GISPP Academy.
GISPP Academy. Got it.
You are not familiar with Gispp?
No, actually, this is my first time with you guys, and
Thank you.
my cousin is in cybersecurity, and I'm actually a web developer, and he introduced me to that, and I was talking to him regarding this vulnerability, so he asked me to join this so that I learned. So I would also like to take part in your second part where you will show.
Yeah, that would be, I'm confident that would be interesting for all of you guys because it is all practical things. So I'm quite hopeful that will help.
So do I have to give you my email address or something, or WhatsApp number, so that
Shehzad Saab, can you input on this? Shehzad Saab?
We don't have a registration form for this one, but we have a Facebook page. You can look for us on the Facebook page and see the next event date. I will just share it in the group chat. Give me a minute, I will share it here. Anybody else?
Because you also said that you will send us with the presentation also. So yeah, that
presentation I will not send to everybody. I will upload somewhere and share the link, inshallah. No worries. In the same video description, I will put the link of the slides.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's from my side.
Sir. Just stay with us, and I will share the links here. Huh? Anybody has any other questions?
Anyone have any other questions? Okay, say it for yes.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, what's up?
Thank you for the session. It was a brilliant one, actually.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, I'm in the development field also. Just one question I have to ask. For the next session, you are going to conduct the lab. Is it going to be Linux based or web Windows based also? Like we can actually.
So we can do basically we are suggesting Kali Linux for that, and you can install Kali Linux on your Windows machine also. So what we are going to do is we are going to provide you links for installing those things on your computer, so you are ready for the labs. And we are also going to use OWASP Zap. That's a Windows application. So those two applications, one of the operating system that is Kali Linux we are using. You can install Kali Linux in your Windows machine also. And we are going to use OWASP Zap, which is also a Windows application. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That will be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think if all of us are good, we will announce our next session pretty soon, that the date and time of that session and the prereq for that. Shiraz sir, if you're okay, we can end the session.
We'll stop the session now. Let's stop the recording first.